Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar presentation organized by BALYO on the occasion of the release of its 2022 sales. Before handing over to Pascal Rialan, BALYO's CEO, and Franck Schuffa, BALYO's CFO, just to let you know that there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You have the opportunity to ask your questions thanks to the toolbox at the bottom of your screen. Just need to chat your question, and then we'll answer it at the end of the presentation. Pascal, it's your turn.
Thank you very much, Thomas, and welcome to our investors today. So I will today come back with Franck to the annual sales and Q4 order intake for BALYO, and we will dive into this presentation in 3 steps. As always, there are few people connected which are new to the company, so I will do a short introduction about BALYO. Then I will comment the annual sales and Q4 order intake. And after that, I would say the heart of the webinar will be dedicated to explain into more details, into great details actually, how BALYO intends to pursue its sales deployment, especially in its direct sales channel. So just as an introduction, again, a webinar like this is made so that we all get a better insight and look into BALYO's execution as well as performance. We trust today BALYO is one of the best prepared driverless forklift companies out there, and I would say globally, for 3 reasons. First, in terms of technology, BALYO has developed only proprietary technological bricks based on a simple autonomy kit, which is mounted on standard forklifts. That's the model. In terms of execution model, go-to-market model, BALYO has a multiple sales channel model, direct sales driven by BALYO's team, as well as indirect sales. Indirect sales is being executed via 2 categories of partners, 2 historical OEM, forklift manufacturers, which are Hyster-Yale Group from the US, as well as Linde Material Handling, mostly in Europe, but we work with Linde Material Handling as well in the APAC region. BALYO works also with independent integrators, likes of Kerber Supply Chain, which is based also globally, but also Ulma from Spain or Clevertech from Italy. In terms of the ambition and the strategic focus of BALYO, we focus today on the user experience so that users can actually design, simulate, install, and operate our robots themselves, only with a limited support from our teams. This is an ambition. We're not there yet, but it's a very strong element to read BALYO today. Doing all of this with a positive impact roadmap, which I will come back to at the end of this presentation. Now, the new management team, I've been, just for the one who do not know, appointed CEO of BALYO as of January 2020, so it will have been now 3 years. And together with Franck and the rest of the team, we have started back then delivering a game-changing strategy for BALYO. The strategy was articulated over few elements. The first one is to massively reduce the cost and streamline our organization so that we can ambition to deliver break-even for the organization. We now focus our operational effort commercially on direct sales with our own teams. This is new to BALYO. Until the end of 2020, so 2 years ago, BALYO was solely selling exclusively to Hyster-Yale Group or Linde Material Handling. So BALYO didn't have any commercial autonomy. And this diversification of our sales channel will allow us, obviously, to deliver the growth objective we have for the company. Last but not least, and that's the core and heart of this webinar today, 2022 has been a year where BALYO validated the potential and the growth potential of its direct sales channel, embedded, as I mentioned before, on growth which will be driven by a revolutionary user experience based on web interface to install robots for clients themselves. So as a short introduction, BALYO is a truly global mobile robotics company, probably the only one listed today on the stock exchange, of any stock exchange, by the way. We've been founded in 2006. We're listed since 2017. We have roughly 150, 160 FTE in the world. The majority in France or Europe, the second region for us being the US with about 20 to 30 people. And the remaining team is spread over the APAC and China region. The headquarters of BALYO, that's where I'm calling you from today. We have actually manufacturing, test, and R&D center in the southeast of Paris, which you're welcome to visit when you're visiting Paris. And we have a fully owned subsidiary based in Boston since 2013, as well as a fully owned subsidiary in Singapore since 2015. As I mentioned before, we have industrial partnership with Kion, the mother company of Linde Material Handling, as well as Hyster Group, and non-exclusive distribution agreements with various integrators. In terms of global footprint, you see here on this slide the 3 headquarters I've just mentioned, as well as countries where we also have teams. So important for us, I'll come back to that, is Australia, which is new, just basically a year ago. More importantly, in orange or red, depending on the screen you guys have, the countries where BALYO operates, where clients, users of our technology operates robots today. So we truly have a global footprint, even if we're still a small company. And our clients are operating today north of 1,000 robots, over 300 manufacturing or warehousing sites in more than 30 countries. BALYO is about converting pallet movements to autonomy. Today, the vast majority of the pallets in the world are moved with forklifts, which are manually operated by drivers in 1, 2, 3 or more shifts. So basically, BALYO is setting its development onto an existing market, which is a manual forklift, manual material handling market, which is today a 50 billion plus market. In this market, 80% of the cost generated, and to operate these machines are forklift drivers. So this is basically the largest market where autonomy of one of the highest return on investment. If you compare that with taxi drivers or other markets, the share of the driver is lower in all other markets where a machine is being driven by a human. And it is also the first market where autonomy can become a reality, or is becoming a reality actually, because we're already selling obviously these systems in projects. And so the playground, if you wish, the space in which we are, attacking this market is a 200 billion plus. 200 billion includes obviously the equipment, but also the forklift drivers. So that the stake for our clients is not 50 billion. It's actually the 50 billion plus the 80% OPEX, which is converts to roughly 200 billion. I'm not saying 200 billion is a market today, but this is a potential into which our technologies, the return on investment we're selling, taps into. And today, 98, 99% of this market, of the industry, of DC operators are still moving pallets manually. This slide provides you some insight about the user base BALYO has today. As I mentioned earlier on, until the end of 2020, BALYO was selling its product via 2 exclusive partnerships, Linde Material Handling and Hyster Group. And these are the clients we have conquered with these 2 partners. until the end of 2020. Since early 2021, obviously, we also sell direct. I'll come back to that in a minute. What you see on this slide, we have three core categories where our systems, our products are being used. Logistics being one, FMCG, automotive, and then there's obviously a long tail of other sectors where our products are being used. One element which is important in this slide is the logistics one. BALYO was the first mobile robotics company out there focusing, or at least developing technologies, products, and applications, solutions, which can be used in standard DCs operated by 3PLs. This is very important because if you think about the previous slide and the size of the material handling market, the biggest user by far of material handling equipments are actually DCs and 3PLs. So that's even more important for us that we can tap and address this market or this segment of the market, and we were the first to do it. So BALYO's technologies, BALYO product range has been really developed with positioning, technology abilities to be able to answer the specific challenges 3PL are facing into operating DCs. When you manage this kind of challenge, it's even more easier to actually address the manufacturing sector. Now after this short presentation about BALYO, I will address the press release which have been published yesterday evening on the market. So this slide presents you the order intake of BALYO in 2021 and 2022, which obviously is showcasing the excellent results the company has generated in Q4 with a year-on-year growth of almost 110%. Overall, over 2022, our growth in order intake is 21% versus 2021. Now, the most important aspect to read and understand BALYO is obviously the direct sales. Again, until the end of 2020, we were solely selling indirect via our partners. So we had no control truly in terms of the growth, in terms of the sales activity on the field. And this order intake in direct sales has grown from 0 in 2020 to 17% in 2021 and 37% in 2022. This is particularly important because this validates for us the ability of the organization to become autonomous commercially and control its various sales channels. In terms of the backlog at the end of the year, the backlog in a company like BALYO is basically the sum of all the order intake which has not been recognized in revenue at the end of the year. So it was roughly 13 million at the end of December, which is a growth of 33% versus a year before. And in terms of breakdown by geography, it is very important, that's another aspect to read and understand BALYO, that there is a strong shift for BALYO towards the North American market. First, the growth in the North American market is massive, but as you can see, the 5.8 million represents roughly half of our backlog from this region. So over 2023 and probably also 2024, you will see, we will experience a very strong shift of the organization in terms of resources, in terms of manpower, in terms of revenues and order intake in this region. Now, when it comes to revenues, BALYO has successfully concluded the year by a growth of 11% versus last year, but especially delivering, and you can see that in Q4, an excellent performance. So Q4 is obviously showing an 80% growth versus last year. This has a couple of reasons. First, we experienced some supply issues during the year, which we were able to completely compensate in Q4. And we also had in the orders our OEM shared to us commitment orders we got for 2022, seasonality towards H2. Now, what is of importance to us is especially the direct sales revenue, now represented 20% of our revenues in 2022 versus only 8% in 2021. This is obviously a very important metric for us to monitor our commercial but also revenue autonomy against the historical partners. Now, I will focus onto our new strategy and the elements which are important to understand to be able to read what the management has done, how sales deployment will be executed moving forward. To understand BALYO and our market, we believe it's important for all of us to understand what drives customer to a company like BALYO and the products BALYO is commercializing. One of the big driver, clearly, is labor shortage, right? This is especially tough when operating logistic platforms. This is a very mobile workforce, which basically goes easily to the next best location. So this is really something driving strongly logistics platforms, supply chain operators towards autonomous driverless forklifts. Obviously, inflation is an important factor too. When someone buys a forklift, autonomous forklift in year one, there is no inflation for the years to come. For operators, you have to add for the years to come the inflation rate to compare OPEX versus the OPEX of having to operate autonomous forklift. Other factors which plays also a role into the decision to convert a location to autonomy is obviously accidents with manual operated forklift, but also safety consideration regarding handling of the material itself. These are all costs which one has to take into account when comparing manual operated locations versus autonomous locations. Now, there are other factors which are also damping the attraction to or investment towards automation. And typically, the main and biggest hurdle for operators are lack of resources to actually engage into this transformation, especially obviously in robotics or automation technologies. This is a big and by far the same thing as the labor shortage. The labor shortage to go into robotics is frequently quoted or mentioned as being the biggest hurdle for manufacturing or logistics sites to convert. There is also a perceived complexity and a fear associated to that, to robotics and automation technologies. Last but not least, there are also elements which are less visible or less evident, which are, excuse me, the perceived complexity, as I mentioned, but automation is frequently associated with a very fixed infrastructured, heavy infrastructured automation, which is very difficult to reallocate from one site to a new site. So this is where also BALYO has a card to play. Our robots are highly mobile, but also from one side to another side. We're not talking about here fixed infrastructure automation, which is very similar to some extent to civil engineering challenges. Now, what is BALYO's answer to these drivers and dampers of the market? First, to remove this fear, we believe we should be able to engage our clients more by providing to them the simplest technologies, the simplest tools on the market, so they can do it ultimately themselves. That's a simplified user experience, user journey, investments BALYO has been pursuing the last few years. We are actually just at the threshold to release the first version of these tools to our customers and users. BALYO is already using some of these tools and have installed last year a first site with these simplified web-based tools. And during the course of 2023, we will spread these tools to some of our selected customers. A second element to understand how BALYO answer these challenges is a focus in high-bay storage. As you will see on the next slides, BALYO has today generated technologies, solutions in high-bay storage, which are unique in the world. And we are obviously very proud of that. BALYO is also using only standard forklifts from OEM partners to convert them into driverless forklifts, which is also an advantage because this machine can be used also manually if needed to. Obviously, the standard mode of usage is autonomous mode, but they can still be used dual mode. That reduces, again, the hurdle, the fear people may have to convert to automation. Now, as you've seen on the previous slide, we are globally present, working on all key markets of the world. Still, because we're using standard OEM forklift, we can also propose a local service in partnership with our OEM network dealerships locally. Last but not least, very important for us and for me personally, is that we've engaged into an impact roadmap as far as 2021, and the first measures have been implemented in 2022. Now, there are 4 blocks to read BALYO and in terms of the new strategy which has been initiated 2020. The first one related to the reduction of the cost. We've talked about that in previous webinars, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Today, we believe these are the key elements to read us and to understand the growth perspective around BALYO. First, let's focus on high-bay storage. Second, let's focus in direct sales model. If we sales direct, the whole management team at BALYO has control and the narrative and the tempo and the prioritization of these projects versus other things clients may want to do. Third, we have a strategic shift and a business shift toward the US. I already mentioned that. And fourth, the simplified customer experience is at heart of this execution. Without the fourth brick, there is no focus on high-bay storage for us. There is no transition, and there is no shift. It will be much more difficult for the organization to execute. And all these elements will contribute, are already contributing into building a strong commercial pipeline and generate the growth performance we expect for the organization. This slide is just a reminder of the applicative coverage and the fleet of robots BALYO has developed today. It's a very comprehensive fleet which allows BALYO to answer virtually any kind of logistic application into a warehouse. The only application we do not engage truly into is trailer loading and unloading, which is the most complex technological challenge to achieve. And as you will see on the next slide, we are focusing in high-bay storage. For a simple reason, we just have the best product on the market today. It's not us saying it, it's clients telling us. And I'd like to dive 1 minute into why these products are so special. The first one is it's called in the industry a rich truck vehicle, which we call Richie at BALYO. This vehicle is able to handle pick and drop into racking into aisles which are as small as 2.90 meters wide and below 3.20 meters. Why does it matter? It matters because 90% plus of all rack out there where a rich vehicle operates is within this range. And it matters even more because we are the first company in the world who has developed an autonomous forklift able to handle such narrow aisles. The second product is the VINI, which is called a VNA. You have a little exhibit showing the type of application we're talking about. A VNA just handles pick and drop in an aisle without turning. It just translates back and forth into an aisle. Here, BALYO has also developed the first VNA in the world, which is able to reach pick and drop height above 14 meters. Why does it matter? Because countries where space is scarce, typically Japan, Germany, UK, Singapore, where we have our APAC headquarters. Going to such heights is critical. So BALYO is very proud of having these two products. Today, we are virtually the only one to produce, to be able to, propose this kind of application to the market. That will certainly not last forever, but this is for us a very strong competitive advantage, and that's why we'd like to focus today in high-bay storage. There is another factor why we would like to focus in high-bay storage, which is more counterintuitive. It is actually easier to convert your DC or warehouse starting from the middle. If you know the screen we have, you see my face is a warehouse. You can easily understand that when you have rack in the middle of this warehouse, most of the manual operator, truck loading and loading, manual operations will be limited at the outer range of this site. In the middle, you have racks, and really within racks, you don't have that many interactions with the rest of the teams, right? Even if our machines can fully operate in full safety with people around, in terms of application, in terms of operational transformation, and in terms of repeatability, replicability of the application, it's much easier actually to start converting racking system within the center of a DC or a manufacturing site than trying to operate, forklifts floor to floor around the racks and starting with that. So this is another reason why we'd like to focus into high-bay storage. The last element, which is also very important to us, high-bay storage application and projects are usually much larger. Historically, the average size of project at BALYO hovered around 300 to 400,000 euro or dollar. It's very similar today. When you look at the project we won recently and the project in our pipe, when one is facing a request for proposal for a site in high-bay storage, we are usually in front of projects which are almost always bigger than 1 million euro or $1 million. And frequently, we have requests for projects in 2, 3, or 4 million euro or dollar. So now you understand why it matters to BALYO. With a revenue last year of 24 million, just a couple of projects, for BALYO can already convert into this level of order intake and revenues. And that's why we are very confident that BALYO has a great growth potential for the future, because simply by focusing in high-bay storage, we'll be able to generate order intake and revenue much larger than what we are generating today. On this slide, you see a couple of examples of clients, sites, which we have been selling recently at so-called first-time buyers. The execution of our direct sales strategy is really based into selling first projects and then converting this first project and this client to repeat sales. Bolloré Logistics is based in Singapore. Actually, BALYO relocated its team in Singapore into Bolloré Logistics offices. And the first robot we sold to this site in Singapore will be installed in the coming weeks. There was a very long lead time, to get this robot shipped and received locally, more than a year. And we believe that by the end of Q1 or maybe within Q2, we will be able to engage with Bolloré repeat sales projects in much larger scales than obviously just one robot. Danone is another example where we sold a first-time project to them with 10 Ritchie. So it's quite a large project for a first-time buy, but it gives you also an indication, of the size of project. This project was close to $2 million. So this is really give you an indication of the kind of potential, knowing that Danone has more than 200 sites globally. Last but not least, I wanted to mention SSW in Singapore, because this is a site where we are sold the first application with 3 VNA at 17 meters. Now, this is a heart, I would say, of the webinar and presentation. This is a case study about Bear. For the one who don't know Bear, it's a very well-known home paint brand in the US. Behr Paint relationship with BALYO started at the end of 2020 when we engaged with them to sell a first application in one of their factory in Texas. This system has been sold in September 2021, and we successfully delivered and installed the first application with 3 Reach by July 2022. Give you an indication of the duration of the sales, commercial negotiation, the commissioning phase, and then we engaged in July 22 for repeat sites, actually 4 new sites spread all over the US. And these sites, the order came in December. So in the first case, 2020 to July, and repeat sales, obviously much shorter negotiation, much quicker decision-making process, larger order with an order in December. And because we have most of these robots in stock, I'll come back to that in later on, we will probably complete the installation of this site by September. So this is basically the timeline of a typical business case where we convert a first buy to a repeat sales. Now, when we look at that, obviously at a BALYO scale, what does it mean? As mentioned before, we went from 17 to 37% in 2022, and BALYO ambitions in 2023 to have 65% of its global order intake as direct sales. How will we achieve that? So this graph shows you, provides you, an indication of how many clients BALYO has been generated in direct sales in 2021, in 2022. What is our ambition in 2023? And especially the second column is important, which is a repeat buyer. So in 2022, we only had Behr. Again, we just started not even 2 years ago when we look back in 2022. And we ambition this year to have multiple repeat sales at all the clients we have acquired in 2022. Why do we believe this is reasonable, realistic, and will be achieved by the teams? Simply because our pipe has multiplied by 4 over 2022. We have concluded, or we have analyzed our pipe conversion rates, and today, over a 12-month rolling period, we have encountered a conversion between 20 to 30% of the pipe over a 12-month period. So looking at the pipe, which we had at the end of 2022, a conversion rate of 20 to 30% over the next 12 months, we know that the 65% is achievable for BALYO. Obviously, this will be done with an overall growth acceleration in direct sales in 2023, especially in the US. So we believe that over the full year, more than half of the direct sales will be done in the US alone. This is also something I wanted to share with you today. Order intake, revenues, and cash-in are 3 independent cycles. Obviously, they are they are indirectly connected, but they are at a time when you do a photography at time 0, all these data are disconnected. So what this graph shows you is basically the complete full cycle of a project, between 6 months to a year to simulate, negotiate, commercially agree, legally agree on a project. Then you get a purchase order at T0. You get 100% in our backlog or in our order intake book, but you have no cash and you have no revenue. 30 to 60 days later, we receive the first payment of the first invoice, typically 30 to 40% of the original order intake. As soon as we deliver the robot on site, we generate another invoice to generate between 40 to 50% of cash intake. And the revenues will progressively be recognized along these months, right? Then when we hand over the system after the commissioning at site, we invoice a third invoice, typically 10 to 30%, depending on how much we've invoiced before. And typically, the revenues will be recognized close to 100% by this moment. There is another element important to read in this slide, which is on the left column, the timeline. When we mention stock and days, we are always talking about days, obviously. But what means stock is, as you can see, the timeline is much shorter. As I mentioned to you, BALYO has invested heavily into stock of base trucks, forklifts, as well as stock of robots. Why did we do that? Well, we did that at the end of 2021, when supply chain started to become a subject. But BALYO decided to do that for a simple reason. We felt that it will be a significant driver to allow us to convert sales. And it has proven very efficient for us, because obviously as a client, if you know you can get your robots within few months instead of a year, it's a very strong motivator to actually select BALYO. For us, it's another huge advantage, upon not just for the sales, but also for the recognition of the revenues. As soon as a robot is matched with an order, we can recognize the revenue and it leaves the stock. Obviously, it has to be financed, so there is a cash and a financing element to it. Now we have a very good agreement with our OEM partners to avoid too much of a cash impact. But this isn't cash impact for the company, but it is worth it, again, in this transition BALYO's into, and also to accelerate revenue recognition. American market. As I said before, we are heavily focusing into the US market. There are a few reasons for that. One of the reasons is our chief sales officer is actually a native from Michigan. He's based in Paris, supporting the teams globally. But obviously, that provides us a strong backwind to push our teams to sell in this market. We have recruited a great team in the US. The US has the advantage between US operators and European operators to be much quicker in decision making, which is reducing, the lead time between first contact and decision, as I've shown it before. So typically in the US, decision making could be as short as 3 months. We've seen projects going ahead within 3 months of the first contact. You will never see this kind of decision making speed in Europe or in APAC, actually. Project tends to be larger. The reason for that is DCs, manufacturing sites tend to be also larger. And on the product BALYO has, there we have clearly a much less intense competitive landscape in the US than in Europe or elsewhere. I said before, 50% of our backlog at the end of the last year were coming from the US. Our pipeline clearly indicates that this trend will be pursued in 2023, and that in 2023, as well as probably 2024, the majority of our order intake sold directly will come from the US. Moving ahead even further, from 2025, we believe the organization will rebalance again its order intake over the 3 regions. You see a couple of names on this slide of companies which have selected BALYO recently in the US. Now, it's time to conclude this webinar, and I'd like to conclude it on where I almost started it, which is a very ambitious user experience roadmap. Clients want and shall be allowed to do it themselves. Even in industrial settings, if our industry actually is not able to transform these products, these technologies into simpler tools, it will be extremely difficult to convert massively, simply because you don't have out there the experience, the willingness. There is also a risk aversion in an industrial organization to go for that. So very interestingly, one of the biggest damper which has been, we ask clients, why didn't you go for it before? And many times there is one word which came back: fear. What clients say, not we say it, clients say it. Fear of changing operation, fear of having to manage this operational transformation. Fear of not having the team, we mentioned that before. And there's another one, which is less evident, which is fear of not making the right technological choice. Every week there's a startup out there saying we have a disruptive technology, deep learning, whatever. Sometimes bullshit, which can be mentioned by some of the operators. So this is really not helping companies to make a choice. So at BALYO, we are convinced, and we've been investing heavily the last few years to provide the simplest, least intrusive, most capable technology to suppress these fears. So our technologies, our products, our business model, our go-to-market is able to drive this change and DIY, allowing this DIY for the client. So we are very confident for 2023 because we will provide as early as this year, probably in Q2, Q3, a first software suite to allow clients to commission robots. And not just the floor-to-floor simplest material flow, but for the whole fleet, also for the high bay storage. So this is the conclusion of this webinar. At BALYO, we believe that everything I've just presented is worthless if we don't act with a positive impact mindset. So we've engaged already in 2021 this process. You can download on our website the impact report from 2021. BALYO is engaging its roadmap onto various relevant areas, which are listed here. I can tell you that the most impactful area is actually people transportation. We still are flying our teams all over the globe, or at least regionally, to go to clients. And these have a very strong carbon footprint for the organization. And that's why it's even more important for us to invest in client DIY to basically massively reduce the level of traveling our teams is doing. So you will be able to download our 2022 data reports probably in Q1 2023. I'm done with the presentation today. I'm very happy to take questions. If there are any, Thomas, maybe you can pick it up now.
Sorry. Thank you, Pascal. Thanks a lot for this presentation. Actually, we have one question. Can you maybe come back on the recent PR on Danone and Bayer, which were released in the past weeks?
Okay. But Danone and Bayer, sometimes people ask us, why did you not communicate it already in 2022? Simply because sometimes, we have to validate this PR with the clients. And this order really came at the end of last year. But Bayer and Danone are really the perfect example of what BALYO is achieving today. High bay storage, mid-size to large-size applications. At Bayer, we will actually start converting 4 new sites with 3 robots each. So the smaller type of place to start. There is a much bigger potential in each of these sites, obviously, than just 3 robots. Danone is a good example because it's actually a full conversion of their finished goods outbound. So we're taking pallet out of manufacturing, out of production, storage it in a buffer warehouse, and it's shipped within 1 or 2 days. We're talking about yogurts, so they cannot stay in shelf for months. And this side, because there will be no more manual movement whatsoever in this warehouse, we have 10 robots which will do the job. The only thing which is not being fully driverless is just a truck loading, trailer loading material flow. So these 2 examples are perfect examples of what BALYO stands for and being capable of.
We don't have any further questions for now, but I don't know if
Still a few minutes, so I'm very happy to.
So I remind you that you can ask questions using the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Guess the presentation was quite clear.
If there are no questions, I mean, I'd like to thank you, Thomas, and everybody who has joined. We have had yesterday the same webinar in French, so I'm very happy to engage with our investors and stakeholders to have this nourished exchange so that we can always give a better, more transparent picture about the company and the culture of the organization and the strategy of the organization. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Pascal. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.